Have you ever wondered if the lines between our conscious minds, hidden knowledge, and perhaps even, the realm beyond life are far blurrier than we typically imagine?
Mm.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into one of the most intellectually compelling debates of the early 20th century. It's a debate that swirled around a truly remarkable individual, Mrs. Leonora E. Piper.
A fascinating case, really.
Yeah, we've sifted through a fascinating collection of historical documents, research papers, and first-hand accounts, mostly from around 1901, 1902.
Mm.
And they're all grappling with Mrs. Piper's extraordinary abilities as a medium.
Right.
So our mission for you today is to unpack the two dominant theories trying to explain her phenomena back then, Spiritism versus telepathy.
Yeah, central conflict, yeah.
And to understand why this one case pushed the very boundaries of what science thought it knew about consciousness and, well, reality itself.
Yeah.
Imagine, if you will, the turn of the century. It was an era just ripe with fascination for the human mind's hidden powers.
Oh, absolutely.
And right at the heart of it all was Mrs. Leonora Piper, a woman who became, well, a scientific puzzle box.
What's fascinating here isn't just the individual, though she's central, of course. It's the way Mrs. Piper's existence, just her being there doing what she did, forced the scientific world to confront its own assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't simply, a curious sideshow attraction. Her abilities prompted years of serious, systematic study by some really leading minds of the day, particularly through the Society for Psychical Research, the SPR.
Right, ESPR.
They couldn't just dismiss her, and that was the problem for them, really.
And what a subject she was. Mrs. Leonora E. Piper, she sort of soared to prominence as one of the most celebrated trance mediums.
Hugely famous.
And her integrity, her honesty was so widely accepted, even by her harshest critics. It was almost legendary. The SPR, this incredibly rigorous investigative body, employed her for many years.
On both sides of the Atlantic, too.
Yeah, putting her through the most intense scientific scrutiny. They basically saw her as the gold standard for mediumship, didn't they?
They really did.
Mm.
And the SPR itself, as an institution, it started out as a purely scientific organization, explicitly without any sort of avowed opinions on spiritualism.
Okay.
Their goal was to courageously study all these phenomena under strict scientific conditions, impartial observers trying hard to avoid bias.
Right.
Yet, the sheer depth and consistency of their work with Mrs. Piper, well, it actually led some of their most prominent investigators, like Dr. Hodgson in Boston and Professor Hislop of Columbia University, it led them to publicly embrace the spiritistic view as a direct result of their studies. They felt the evidence was, well, that compelling.
But then, okay, here's where the narrative takes a really unexpected turn, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. The big twist.
After years collaborating with the world's most respected psychic researchers, Mrs. Piper herself threw this massive curveball into the debate.
Huge.
In October 1901, the New York Sunday Herald published this, extended written statement from her. And she publicly declared her own opinion.
Your own opinion, yeah.
That her phenomena were probably due to causes allied to telepathy and hypnotism rather than to the influence of the so-called spirits of deceased persons.
Can you imagine the shockwaves?
I mean, seriously. The very subject of the study, the medium herself, seems to contradict the conclusions of some of her most prominent investigators.
Her statement didn't just cause a stir. It ignited what was described at the time as lively interest and deep feeling among everyone studying psychology and modern spiritism. It sparked this widespread, really vigorous discussion.
Right.
The Medico-Legal Society, for instance, which was a serious academic body, they devoted 2 long, extended sessions just to this topic in December 1901 and then again in February 1902. They were getting calls for discussion from all over the country, even from abroad.
Wow.
This wasn't just, idle speculation or parlor talk. It was a profound academic and public debate, high stakes for scientific understanding.
So with Mrs. Piper's seismic statement, the intellectual world scrambles for explanations. And the first major contender, championed by figures like Dr. Thompson J. Hudson, Dr. F.E. Daniel, Professor W. Xavier Sedoth, well, they presented this vision of the human mind so powerful, it almost seemed as fantastical as the spirits themselves.
Right, the telepathy angle.
Yeah, the radical power of telepathy. Their core argument was simple but, well, profound. Phenomena shouldn't be attributed to supramundane agency, meaning spirits,
Spirit.
if they could possibly be explained by natural law. And for them, telepathy from living persons, especially this concept of the subjective mind, was the far more rational, more scientific hypothesis.
And this telepathic view, it hinged really heavily on that concept of what they called the subjective mind, often termed the subliminal self by the SBR folks.
Subliminal self, okay.
This wasn't just our everyday subconscious, where you put your keys. It was theorized as this vast, deeper mental reservoir entirely distinct from our objective waking consciousness. And this subjective mind, they believed it had astonishing powers. It could access latent memory, for instance.
Latent memory?
Yeah, like knowledge you've acquired but aren't consciously remembering. Maybe a tiny detail from a book you read years ago, or something someone said in passing.
Okay, I see.
This mind was considered prodigious, potentially perfect, storing everything that has ever entered it. And crucially, its telepathic powers were thought to be best developed under abnormal conditions.
Like hypnosis.
Exactly, like hypnosis or mesmerism, trance states, essentially.
That's an incredibly expansive view of our subconscious capabilities then. So if our minds, even subconsciously, hold these vast stores of forgotten or unacknowledged information, what seemingly impossible things could then be attributed to that internal reservoir rather than, an external spiritual source?
Precisely. That's the question it forces, right? How much more are we ourselves capable of than we even realize? It makes you wonder.
Yeah, it really does. And what's truly clever, maybe even a little too clever, about this telepathy hypothesis is that it even tried to explain the failures, the inconsistencies in Mrs. Piper's communications.
Right, the moments where it didn't quite work.
Exactly. Proponents argued that telepathy, being a natural law, had its own quirks. It was apparently better at conveying concrete ideas, like pictures or vivid scenes, rather than abstract concepts.
More visual.
But it often struggled with proper names, which led to these frustrating instances of groping, guesswork, fishing for clues, and sometimes total failure in the communication.
You see that reported a lot in the transcripts.
Yeah, and they would be followed by these voluble explanations that did not explain. So what does this mean? Well, the very inconsistencies that might make you doubt a spirit could actually be interpreted as evidence for telepathy's specific and imperfect way of working.
It's a neat way to frame it, yeah. It sort of accounts for the messiness.
Almost too neat, maybe.
Well, possibly. And they also introduced a more advanced concept to cover even more complex cases, telepathy à trois.
À trois, like for three.
Exactly, transmission to a third person. Think of it like a psychic relay race.
Okay.
Instead of just a direct thought connection from person A, the source of the information, straight to the medium, person B.
Right.
The theory suggested information could be acquired telepathically from person A and then transmitted telepathically to a third party, person C, like the sitter.
Ah, the person getting the reading.
Yes, via the medium, person B. This was apparently considered a very common phenomenon, and it was absolutely crucial for explaining those cases where the medium revealed information that the immediate sitter didn't know.
But someone else, somewhere, did know it.
Potentially. Yes, someone connected, however distantly. That was the idea.
That's a fascinating way to try and bridge the gaps in the theory. And they did have some genuinely compelling examples they cited for telepathy.
They did. Andrew Lang, the prominent folklorist, he described a case involving a Miss Angus, a crystal gazer. And apparently, in a normal, wide-awake state, she described actions of people in India that were like 3 weeks to a fortnight old.
Wow. Specific.
Yeah. And this information was unknown to Miss Angus herself, but it was known to her sitter.
Oh, okay.
And later, she apparently described some lady's activities at 4 p.m. when it was actually 10 p.m., and this was unknown to the lady's mother, who was right there present. Lang saw these as cross-currents of telepathy.
Cross-currents. Interesting phrase.
And Dr. Sadok's own experiments are perhaps even more striking. He conducted tests where he would intensely visualize his deceased father, first alive and healthy, then seriously ill.
Right.
The subject, in a trance, accurately described both phases. It really seemed like she was catching his vivid thought images.
Directly from his mind.
It appeared so. And in another experiment, he held a hypodermic vial of morphine in his mind, just visualized it.
Okay.
The subject, a Mrs. E, not only described the drug, but she physiologically manifested its effects. Her heart rate increased. She felt nauseous.
Whoa. From just a thought.
Apparently. And what's more, she somehow correctly knew that morphine in minute doses is a stimulant. Information that she didn't know consciously.
But he did.
But Dr. Sadhu did know it. That really pushed the boundaries of, well, mental transfer.
So the telepathy camp, they developed this remarkably comprehensive framework trying to explain almost everything. Their view, in summary, was that the great bulk of supernormally acquired knowledge was just due to telepathy from the living.
Mind to mind.
And this theory was presented as covering every case within the range of human conception. It was this powerful effort to explain the inexplicable through a seemingly rational, natural law.
A very comprehensive attempt.
Yeah, but that continues yourself. And this is where the Spiritists really made their stand, wasn't it? What if the information shared was demonstrably unknown to any living mind involved?
Precisely. That's the sticking point. While robust for some phenomena, the telepathic hypothesis faced this critical challenge when it had to account for information that truly appeared to be outside the knowledge of any living person in the chain, however distantly connected you tried to make it. Critics argued that stretching telepathy to cover all phenomena implying the subconscious mind could somehow, globally travel, selectively retrieve specific obscure facts, or perfectly simulate entire personalities. Well, as some put it, that was science run mad. Or a wild Laputan conjecture.
Laputan conjecture. Wow. Strong words.
Yeah. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the telepathic hypothesis, for all its cleverness, it just seemed to hit this wall of improbability for certain cases.
So where did they, the Spiritists, believe the information was coming from, if not the living? This is where the Spiritism hypothesis really gained traction, right? Presenting compelling evidence for information unknown to anyone present.
Exactly. They had counterexamples. Take the one recounted by Judge Daly. A supposed spirit claiming to be John Taylor, a sailor from New Bedford.
Okay.
This spirit detailed incidents of his early life and his death, details completely unknown to Judge Daly or the medium. Now, there was some partial verification, common names, street names checked out, but no living person they could find could have supplied this specific unknown information via telepathy.
The source was just gone.
Seemingly, yes, completely outside the room, outside the living network.
That's a tough one for telepathy.
It is. And another powerful case involved Dr. Savage's deceased son communicating through Mrs. Piper in what was described as a dead trance.
Dead trance.
Yeah, very deep state. And the son apparently asked his father to destroy specific loose papers in his old room on Joy Street, Boston.
Right.
Now, this was a room the father had never even seen, and the contents were utterly unknown to him.
And did he find them?
He followed the instruction, went to the room, and sure enough, found the specific papers. Now, how could that information be telepathically derived from a living mind if no living person, including the father himself, knew it existed or its specific location?
Right. That's a really powerful point for the Spiritists.
It really is.
And then there's that story of the officer's arbitrary words. This gentleman received automatic writing.
Or the hand moves seemingly on its own?
Yeah, almost like dictated by another entity. And it was supposedly from his deceased brother. The writing reproduced this specific set of arbitrary arrangements of letters, basically nonsense strings.
Not real words.
Not real words. But the brother had created these years before, specifically as a test for posthumous communication. And they were completely unknown to the naturalist who was observing the experiment.
A prearranged test from beyond the grave, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a very difficult coincidence to just explain away without acknowledging some kind of distinct external intelligence, isn't it?
It certainly pushes the limits of coincidence. And perhaps one of the most compelling pieces of evidence against the telepathy from the living hypothesis comes from the Mrs. Howard house fire case.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that one.
Okay, so through an entranced medium, Mrs. Howard, who was deceased, insisted to Judge Daly's wife that her house had been on fire. She described vivid details, fire engines, water coming through the ceiling, even mattresses piled up in the backyard.
Wow, very specific.
Extremely specific. Now, the medium, when she came out of trance, vehemently denied having said any of this.
Didn't remember it.
Apparently not. But someone went to Dr. Howard's house the very next day and verified every single detail, including smoldering mattresses in the backyard. This information was completely unknown to anyone present at the time of the communication, yet it was factually, demonstrably correct.
And imagine being the person who witnessed that unfold. That's mind-bending.
Absolutely. And beyond just the content of the messages, witnesses also pointed to what they saw as clear distinctions between genuine spirit control and mere hypnosis.
How so?
Well, figures like ex-Judge Abram H. Daly and H.C. Wright noted that true spirit control often involved physical distress for the medium. Strange sensations, moans, convulsive actions, sometimes even specific symptoms resembling the pre-death state of the communicating spirit.
Like mimicking how they died.
Sometimes, yes. Not just general discomfort, but maybe the specific coughs or gasps or tremors associated with that person's final moments. A level of detail that seemed to go far beyond simple hypnotic suggestion.
Implying a genuine entity.
That was the argument, implying a genuine spiritual presence rather than just a hypnotic state. Plus, they noted the controlling spirit often didn't believe it was the medium and sometimes actively came against the hypnotizer's suggestions.
Resisted the hypnotist. Interesting.
Yeah. And the spiritist theory also tried to directly address common objections people threw their way, like the perceived triviality of messages. Why weren't spirits delivering profound cosmic truths?
Right. Why talk about Aunt Mildred's missing brooch?
Exactly. They explain that spirits are still, well, folks. People who still care about personal matters. And often, the focus was just on establishing their personal identity, proving who they were, rather than delivering grand pronouncements.
Makes sense. Proof of identity first.
Yeah. And the lack of world descriptions, why spirits didn't talk much about the afterlife, they attributed that to human knowledge being limited to earthly experience. Maybe the conditions of the afterlife are simply indescribable in our terms, or beyond our comprehension.
Or maybe they're not allowed to say.
Who knows? But they also pointed to positive contributions, examples where spirits supposedly provided high and fine ethical and spiritual teaching, solved mysteries, even saved lives.
So the telepathy theory, for all its cleverness, it really seemed to hit a wall for some people. Because now we get to these cases that truly seem to defy any known earthly explanation, where information surfaced that was just a complete blank for every living soul involved. Proponents of Spiritism argued that many phenomena simply cannot be duplicated through the application of any of the known principles of natural law, implying a spiritual source was the only logical answer left.
It really pushed the boundaries of what natural could even mean, leaving this profound and, frankly, unsettling mystery.
Yeah, unsettling is a good word for it.
Indeed. That lingering unknown is just crucial here. And in the midst of all this fascinating, often conflicting evidence, Mrs. Piper's own perspective remains surprisingly elusive, which just adds another layer to the whole enigma.
She didn't stick to the telepathy idea then.
Well, she later denied having made that definitive telepathy statement to the Herald. Then she sort of offered that she simply confesses that I do not know if spirits control her.
So she backed away from certainty.
Yeah, she ended up in a place of uncertainty herself. But her integrity, despite these shifting statements, remained largely unquestioned by most people, even those who disagreed with her conclusions or interpretations. She herself just attributed her powers to these queer sleeps she'd had since she was a girl.
Queer sleeps. Huh. So even the central figure in this whole massive debate couldn't settle the score. It really highlights the scientific dilemma, doesn't it? Perhaps best summed up by the eminent Professor William James.
Oh, William James, yes. Crucial figure.
He'd studied Mrs. Piper for years, and he candidly assessed her phenomena as, and I quote, the most absolutely baffling thing I know.
High praise or perhaps high confusion from a mind like James.
Right. He found fraud out of the question. He was convinced she was genuine, yet he was also critical of the spirit hypothesis. He felt it exhibits a vacancy, triviality, and incoherence of mind painful to think of as the state of the departed.
He didn't like the implications of what the spirits were saying, essentially.
Exactly. It didn't fit his idea of what an afterlife should be, maybe. So he suggested these alternatives, like Mrs. Piper's subliminal extension masquerades, or maybe some kind of floating mind stuff, taking advantage of the trance states.
He's throwing out hypotheses because the main two seem flawed.
Pretty much.
And this dilemma for scientists like James is just critical. He acknowledges the undeniable reality of the supernormal phenomena. He rejects any hint of fraud. But then he finds every explanation for it, whether it's spirits or this incredibly complex, almost godlike subliminal self, more unnatural than the rest.
More unnatural than the rest.
Wow. What James's struggle fundamentally revealed wasn't just his own personal puzzle. It was really a crisis of epistemology for science at the time. It forced a reevaluation of what counted as evidence and explanation when you're confronted with phenomena that seem to defy known physical laws.
Right.
This case wasn't just about spirits versus telepathy. It was about the very limits of what science thought it knew, and maybe still thinks it knows.
And the Society for Psychical Research, the SPR, despite all this back and forth and uncertainty, they remained steadfastly committed to their mission, didn't they?
They did. To investigate the origin of the messages she transmits while she is an unconscious agent. They acknowledged the immense complexity of the subject and the ongoing need for rigorous, unbiased research, even if it led them into the most uncomfortable intellectual territories.
It really was, and maybe still is, a frontier.
Absolutely.
Well, we've certainly taken a profound journey today, haven't we? This deep dive into the case of Mrs. Leonora Piper. It just shows us that even with the most careful scientific inquiry, some mysteries remain profoundly, wonderfully elusive. We explored the logical framework of natural law, trying to explain it via telepathy, and then we confronted its limits with verifiable information that seemed to come from, well, beyond the living minds.
Yeah.
Whether it's the incredible unexplored reach of our own hidden minds or something truly more. Questions are just as vital today, I think, as they were over a century ago.
Indeed. This journey through Mrs. Piper's case, it really highlights the enduring human quest to understand consciousness, death, the very nature of reality. It encourages critical thinking. And it reminds us that, as many of these researchers argued back then, the word impossible, well, it's a word to use with great caution.
Definitely.
It's a testament to the fact that sometimes the most profound truth might lie just beyond our current understanding. We have to stay open.
So as you, our listener, reflect on these accounts, maybe ask yourself this. If the ability to communicate thoughts without words, or even to access knowledge beyond our conscious grasp, if that's real, even partially real, what might that imply about the interconnectedness of all minds, living or otherwise? And what might it imply about the true, hidden extent of our own internal universe?